If you give a 10-year tax holiday, a foreign investor, Indian, Chinese, Pakistani, or whatever, comes here, sets up a factory, runs in the 9th year, 10 months into the 9th year, they change course when the tax holiday is about to end. Is there alignment in terms of the policy and legal framework to encourage local manufacturing, but also expand the tax base without people cheating out the country?
We've just handled considered 4 out of the 5 tax amendment bills government brought. The outstanding issues in the committee, I sit on the same committee with Honorable Kateshuma, Committee on Finance, is that government doesn't have a tax policy. The Minister for Finance said the tax policy is before cabinet.
So on what basis the laws? What's the foundation on which the laws are standing?
If you read their own documents, the Minister of Finance, I think 2019, 2010, 2020, when they launched the domestic tax revenue mobilization strategy, he said we can no longer rely on piecemeal ad hoc tax proposals. We need a comprehensive policy. But for the 4 years that domestic revenue mobilization policy has been in place, they have failed to develop a policy. So in Parliament, we did ask them, and we faced a problem in the committees processing the bills that they brought.
Let me read what the minister said, actually, because I have the document here.
Yeah.
And I'm reading from paragraph 3 of this letter from the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development on that launch of the domestic tax mobilization. Yes, launching. He says, in order to achieve our revenue potential, we must move away from ad hoc annual tax policy changes. These piecemeal adjustments, with little alignment to an overarching strategy, have created a high degree of unpredictability and uncertainty in our tax policy direction. The DRMS, Domestic Revenue Mobilization Strategy, will address this, as well as ensure that our future tax policy embodies the principle of simplicity, fairness, citizen welfare, and sustainability. I'll top it at that.
So we asked the government, when we are processing these bills, what is the basis for the new proposals you are making? If you don't have a policy, you've done no study. But as Andrew said, because of the pressure that they face financing the budget, that's why they will resort to the items they know will bring quick money. They will want to tax fuel, they will want to tax traders, they will want to tax soft drinks. So every year, the tax proposals are proposals on the same items. Even when you look at the items that the government is taxing, they are few.
So you're increasing the burden on either same items or same taxpayers.
Yeah, but because if you don't have a policy, if you read the report of the Auditor General, and it's a point I made when I was opposing the Kateshis, the NRM MPs, who everything that the government has brought, they must support, whether it is the interest of the people they represent or not. The Auditor General, in his report, says last financial year, we exempted taxes worth 1.4 trillion. That's what the Auditor General says. And he did study 36 companies, and he said 22 of those 36 companies and manufacturers were still operating below 50%. He said the very aim for which you offered them tax incentives has not been met. You have no policy. You continue working in an ad hoc way. When you're a group of traders or manufacturers and you meet Museveni and you promise him something, he will exempt you. Whether the Ministry of Finance has studied whether the particular factory you want to establish in Uganda is of value or not, for him, we will say, okay, you go ahead, 20 years, tax holiday, free land, free everything. And then along the way, the Dr. General said, no, these incentives are not working. In fact, he said, we need to study. So when we are processing the bills, my argument was, if you have done no study, if you have no tax policy, you want to exempt manufacturers, so-called manufacturers, and you lose 1.4 trillion, then you lose the moral authority to go and hunt down small traders in Kampala.
Okay.
They are hearing you that you're extending a tax holiday to Andrew Mwenda, you're extending a tax holiday to so and so, whose value the Auditor General has failed to establish. So what is the point you're asking earlier, even the manufacturers that want to attract, the Auditor General has told you, because the intention at the beginning was that those manufacturers should be employing at least 70% Ugandan. They should be using at least 70% local
raw material.
They are not either employing those people or they are not even using local material, raw material. I bought T-shirts here during campaigns. These fellows that are parading themselves as local manufacturers, they import each and everything. They come here and I think they're just doing tailoring. But they're enjoying tax holidays, competing with these traders who are bringing jeans from China. Because if they are using raw materials, because tell me today, either cotton or any other item that we are using to manufacture these garments, they are not using local raw material. So even the factories that you seek to protect, that you give lots of incentives, they are also not using raw materials from Uganda.
Okay. Let me introduce two people we have who joined us later. I have the Honorable Karim Masaba, Mbale City West Industrial Division in Mbale City. Very nice to have you, Honorable Karim Masaba. I also have Professor Waswa Balonyo. Very nice to have you, Prof.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Tonight. Let me come to Dixon Skateshumba. You served in Uganda Revenue Authority. Now you serve as a legislator. How do you run a tax regime without a tax policy?
I think, first of all, we have to understand the kind of economy we are in and be able to come up with a regime, with a taxation policy that speaks to our aspirations, our intentions, because it is true that we even moved a motion on the floor of Parliament demanding that we need to have a policy that will define what do we need to tax, the objectives, and of course give some kind of certainty, especially for if you are trying to attract foreign direct investment or even mobilize people to invest. They need a stable tax regime. And if you look at our country, we are not we are not a player. We don't have companies that play in the global, that have global presence. So in terms of corporations that you would expect they would have worldwide incomes that you can easily tax, we do not have that space. Here you have, in Africa, you have companies which are, South African origin. They are here. When they earn money here, they pay tax. We have example of countries like South Korea, where everybody here was Samsung. You know that they are earning, And so when we look at the kind of taxes we have, direct and indirect, some of us think that with our economy, where you have less than 5 million people on the register, we need to look at how do we then mobilize the revenue. And I think
but what is the explanation from government for not having a policy? How long should it take to develop a policy?
We do not understand, because we are looking forward to what they have before cabinet. But the point I'm trying to make is that essentially now, the efforts you are seeing, including the ad hoc methods that my colleague has talked about, are driven by pressure. Because you have a budget, and then you think about where do you get the money. And so you end up looking at assumptions, economic growth. Okay, we are going to grow at 6%, so revenue should grow at this percent, etc. But there are things we should be looking at. For example, much more focus on indirect taxes, because the more the people consume, the more you are able to get indirect tax. And that is why now efforts like the investments in technology to be able to enable the taxman efficiently collect the revenue come in handy, because we cannot think about increasing taxes now without a basis. You cannot increase VAT when you have in the neighborhood a much lower VAT rate.
So why would you think about increasing VAT when the neighborhood is telling you don't need to be charging VAT at 18%?
And that's what I'm saying. So
yes.
the best thing to do is to look at the efficiency in being able to correct at the current rates. Because even if you come to look at, for example, the excise duty, the excise duty traditionally, globally, was meant to look at the three broad harmful categories to do with health, environment, and things which are socially damaging. But now we are looking at it, we've distorted it. We are using it as a revenue generation, tax. Because if you categorize a product like mineral water as a luxury, you categorize cement as a luxury, you are essentially loading a lot of taxes over tax. So the point I'm trying to make is that we need to take a back step and be able to say, okay, if we are looking at promoting manufacturing, the manufacturing sector is heavily loaded with a lot of incentives. Where have we moved? How have we moved from low manufacturing to high manufacturing? A few years ago, if you went into supermarkets, you would find that 60% of the products are imported. Right now, it is the reverse. We have a lot of products in the supermarkets that are locally manufactured. So,
in the category largely of fast-moving consumer goods.
Fast-moving consumer goods, of course, including agricultural products. So there has been a growth in the manufacturing sector, there is no doubt. And therefore now the conversation would be, how do we encourage people to continue that journey? The traders, and of course I also want to challenge them. There is an issue of change. If you have been a trader 20 years ago and you're not transiting, this is a time for you to think about it. But the point
wouldn't it be time for government also to think about why not many of them are transiting?
Exactly, and these are the issues that Andrew raised. Because even as you think about setting up a factory as a local manufacturer, you need capital, patient capital, at a very affordable credit. So, what is the possibility that if a foreign investor comes in with very cheap money, maybe acquired at 1%, and you acquire from, let's say, UDB, at the best you can get will be maybe 9%, you are producing the same product, how is it possible that you are going to compete on the market?
You're asking questions. I'm sorry, I need to bring in the Honorable Karim Masab and Professor Balonyo. You sat in Parliament, you listened to the presentations, you passed new bills the other day, you bounced some of them. Government creating new taxes or increasing taxes. We haven't even discussed, I will put that to Professor Balonyo when I get to him. When you add on the taxes, you add levies that are not purely tax. Penalties. I mean, where is this confusion coming from? I listened to the president and I was feeling sympathetic for him, but I was also looking at the traders and listening to them and feeling sympathetic to them. Where is all this confusion coming from? And what needs to fix it? What needs to be done to fix it?
Thank you once again, Charles, and good evening to the viewers out there. When you look at a country, Uganda, as we are right now, we still have, we are still in a lot of trouble. as my brother Honorable Ssemuju has put it right, without a proper comprehensive tax policy, I think we'll be moving back and forth. Because when you look at, say, for example, the taxes that usually they bring, the Ministry of Finance, usually they end up actually revising them the following year. For example, I'll look at the tax that they brought on OTT. This was something that came out of nowhere. Probably they wanted to do a copy and paste. I don't know what informed the decision, and they came up and said, no, we need now to tax. We need revenue. We need maybe to reduce people who are making noise on social media and all that, and introduce this kind of tax without any informed point of decision or without doing proper research. So that is where the challenge is, that today government will wake up and say, no, we need to begin taxing your land. Today we need to tax whoever, we need to put a tax on whoever is driving a border, because probably we see there are very many people who have joined that sector, which we do believe is quite wrong. Because when you look at, say, for example, the new proposal that was brought to tax agency banking, the one that caused a lot of confusion and many of us disagreed with it. You want to charge someone who is withdrawing via agency banking 0.5% of the value that they're withdrawing. At the same time, when I go to an ATM and withdraw, you're not charging me this, but who is this agent banker working for? Because the machines they use, they're owned by the banks and they're registered by the banks. They're actually approved by Bank of Uganda. So this is an extension of the bank. So why would you want to limit someone to use this service? And the Honorable Minister came up with an excuse and said probably these agent bankers have moved all over the country, and the cost of operation of people moving to banks is low, that people are no longer incurring the high expenses. So government needs to gain something, or needs to tax this and get some money from this, because people as well are saving, which we believe is very wrong. So when you look at most of the proposals that let me give you an example. Do you know why the agent bankers have come up? It's because our financial sector as a country is still facing a lot of challenges, and it has failed to meet the demand. I'll give you an example. I have many colleagues of mine from Sironko in Bugisu. Many have opened up bank accounts with Centenary Bank. But in the entire Sironko, there is no Centenary Bank. So they are forced to move to come to Mbale in order to transact. But now, because of these agent bankers, we have them in the centers around Sironko. So someone will probably move by foot and go to the agency bank and do the same transaction as one who has gone to an ATM in Mbale. So you shouldn't.
So is that the minister's point that since the agency banking is reducing your cost of moving from Sironko to Mbale to recover your money, the transport you have paid, just pay a small fraction of it as taxes.
So it is as if you're saying that the government is right to punish people for the failure of the bank. Let the bank go and operate there. If the banks were there and people had probably the option and decided to leave the bank and go and use this. So there are some arguments that cannot stand, because unless you're saying people now need to begin.
You're saying that you're punishing me for working because we impose pay as you earn on you.
Yes.
That's not a punishment. But the example you gave of the minister, actually, well, I would have agreed with you. The example you have given of the minister, the argument of the minister, I find it actually convincing. That since this is, you have convenience and you save money in transport, then government can collect a tax on it.
So why
a transaction level, a withdrawal level, a deposit level.
I think I'll proceed.
Yes, proceed, because I need to bring in Professor.
Yeah, I think we need to agree to disagree on that with my colleague here. But when you look at most of the taxes, because we were together, Honorable Katesh and Honorable Ssemuju, and we asked for research that had been done. You know, when we're in Parliament, when you're passing these laws, we have to follow the law. And the law that we usually follow when we're passing the budget is the Public Finance Management Act. When you look at Section 76, it gives you the requirements before a tax bill is brought. It tells you what needs to be done before you propose this new tax. And one of the things is that they must have done research and have the exact figures of how much they expect to spend on implementing this tax, on how this tax is going to affect the economy. So it's quite broad. But that is one of the challenges we have, is that they will bring this tax. For example, when you look at, say, the tax on construction, the one we're talking about, what research have you done? When you look at the tax on land, what have you done? Maybe they are looking at
he's an economist, and many people have been asking.
I think on the land,
yes,
because that one we rejected it as Parliament. What research has been done on land, and how is it going to affect? Because land is a factor of production, and you're the same government that is telling us that we need to go and do industrialization, we need to invest in things that give us money, and you now want to discourage someone to invest in a production venture.
Professor, there are many people have been waiting for you on the show. There is a man called Mutebi James Xavier, and he's tweeted on X and says, help me ask Professor, is there a country that grows by imposing high taxes on imports? If no, then what should the government do? And I want to amend his question just a little. Can Uganda tax itself out of poverty?
No. Taxes should be as low as possible. If you want to promote growth in the economy, taxes must be low. The problem we have is the low tax base, and I think we are getting it wrong. We should expand the tax base. Expanding the tax base means growing more businesses that become viable. That's what we should look at. The absence of a tax policy is because tax policy is an ideological issue. The NRM party should be able to have people, the ideologues, who understand the principles of the NRM and evolve a tax policy, which then goes to the Ministry of Finance to be administered. If it doesn't exist, then you have ad hoc measures. And this is what is happening.
This is what the minister was writing about.
Yes. You have ad hoc measures that, now and again, you keep on looking, where can I find the money? And you go for it. The whole point about tax is lower the tax as much as possible, and you're going to have more people paying willingly.
What is the experience in Uganda? What do you see happening at the moment?
I think at the moment, I share what I've heard, that it's the same people being taxed. The same business people being taxed, and more taxes, again, for the same group. That's where the problem is. That can we expand the tax base by bringing in more businesses? Government should be able to promote more businesses. And there is something which is maybe we're not looking at. We import goods worth $6 billion a year, and we export goods worth $2 billion a year. I think there's $1 billion coming from Cheo, and my grandfather here should know that. And so we have got support for $3 billion every year from IMF. To import, right? Now that is the problem. How can we expand the economy by producing more? We need to look at a number of things. Give a higher price to the cotton producer. You're going to see more cotton here. Give a higher price to the coffee producer, and the number of other products which can be identified, which can then get the economy going. And those. We've done a small study on cassava. Cassava can lead this country out of poverty if it is properly treated. So if we do that, then you can have the economy growing. You have more people, you have more industries. Now, the other challenge we have is the tax exemptions, tax holidays. Tax holidays are leakages in the economy, and they should not be allowed. If you look, clearly reflect back on Mukwano's manufacturing of oil, cooking oil. He used to grow, I think, he support growing of... Yeah, in somewhere in sunflower. He no longer does that. He imports. Because some companies, new companies, have got tax holidays. He can't compete. So...
I want to ask you this.
Yes.
Because you have contradicted yourself. You said low taxes encourage investment, which means zero taxes will actually encourage investment.
No, it can't be zero tax. You cannot have zero tax. Government has a role in the economy, and the only way government role is met is through taxation. That is.
But if low taxes encourage investment, zero taxes should encourage even more investment.
No.
There is what they call tax incentives.
My grandfather, yes. I'm going to give you some theories after this to understand. Some people have been trying to see when you keep on lowering the tax rate, at what point should lower it. That's why you need that ideological group within the NRM to do it, because there are people who are qualified to do this. So they'll give you the ideal tax rate in the different taxes.
Perhaps what I will say is that you see, taxation means what exactly is the aim of government? If the aim of government, for example, is to protect domestic industry, you may want to discourage...
That is the ideological issue.
Yes, you may want to discourage particular products from entering Uganda. You put a high tax rate, a high tariff on them in order to protect and grow your own domestic industry. So tax can be an instrument of a high tax rate can be an instrument of encouraging domestic or investment in value-added industries in your country by protecting your infant industries from the cold winds of external competition. But I want to reinforce Waswa's point, Dr. Wasabalonyo's point. You see, I think that the president of Uganda is obsessed with the foreign direct investment, which is good, but with one risk he has. You see, when you are a foreign investor and you come to Uganda, one, you enjoy a security framework paid for by the taxpayer. You use roads for free, paid for by the taxpayer. You use electricity, which is subsidized by the taxpayer. You employ labor that is educated in schools and treated in hospitals by the taxpayer.
And you paid for it.
So all these are benefits already the taxpayer has paid for you. It's not true that the profits you make are purely from your genius. There's a judicial system where judges and courts are built and paid by the taxpayer. So if you, as a foreign investor, do get tax exemptions and you don't pay your fair share of taxes, we may find that the net benefit to the country is negative. That in fact you are taking, and then you're allowed to, you are not only given tax exemptions, but you're allowed 100% profit repatriation. So you may find at the end of the day, the net benefit to the economy is actually negative. This foreign investor is taking more out of your country than what is...
Isn't that what Ssemuju was arguing from the Auditor General's report? But just before we take a break, Professor, I want to conclude this with you. What are we getting wrong? Because government says we have established all these industrial zones. We have a flip. 60% fast-moving consumer goods in the supermarkets are locally manufactured. We are moving in some direction. But people are saying, look, you're overburdening us. The taxes are too much. Local investors are saying we don't feel ourselves in this tax system. We don't feel ourselves in this system. What are we getting wrong?
I think the emphasis on the foreign investor may be one of the areas where we're not getting it right. There is need to definitely protect the local investor, and they're not aware. Many of them are not aware of the incentives that they are given if they were able to approach the right places. And here Kasita needs to play a bigger role through Private Sector Foundation and UMA to see, can the local investor have access to the benefits? But I don't agree with the benefits of tax incentives. They are always a problem, especially administering them. So we now burden the Uganda Revenue Authority, who is the tax administrator. They're not policy makers. They are tax administrators. We burden them and say, now you find the money. And we find the money on a policy which is hodgepodge. It is not well thought out. So we need to study more on the tax policy, find out where can we find the money. We all know that the economy is small, the taxpayers are few. How do we expand that?
Thank you. We need to take a break, and I will take a break with a message from Dr. Kasiri Vatoke, former minister, who is saying there's this video that's been circulating from Ghana of Ghana saying that they are reducing many taxes and even abolishing some. This is intended to incentivize taxpayers. Why is Uganda's policy on the other side? We'll pick that up after a very short break. Watching the Frontline on NBS TV, and we're discussing this impasse of taxation. The traders were meeting the president, and they're complaining about the myriad of issues largely around taxation. But we're discovering that the country actually doesn't have a tax policy. So on which basis are the laws being generated? And I have a very large panel from Professor Wasabalonyo at the extreme end, Honorable Karim Masaba, Honorable I have Dixon Skateshumbwa, Andrew Mwenda, Dr. Thaddeus Musoke, chairman of Kasita, and the Honorable Ibrahim Ssemuju. James Salemi is watching us and says, trader striking is like a maid at your home going on strike because you have installed cameras in your house to monitor activities and movements, and yet you are feeding her. There is nothing wrong with IFRIS. I would advise that the traders demand only one thing: increase of the VAT registration threshold from the current 150 million shillings to at least shillings 1 billion. That way, the small businesses will be out of the bracket and they won't have problems with the president. James Salemi is an ardent follower of this show. Let me ask a quick question from any one of you around here on this VAT and the traders complaint. The question is, if you buy a shirt from Nightil in Ginger, bring it to sell it in Ginger Town, URA wants you to, through the IFRIS monitoring, to include the 18% VAT. If someone buys it from you in Ginger, brings it to sell in Chikubo, URA wants the 18%. If someone picks it from Chikubo and takes it to Masaka, URA wants the 18%. If they take it to Mbarara, they want the 18%. What value is being added on that shirt? But number two, are you not just increasing its cost to the final consumer? I'm asking as a very basic.
The misconception that people have is that they look at 18% as the tax they have to pay on the face of it. VAT becomes due. VAT payable is a result of what you have charged minus what you paid. So if you go to any manufacturer here who is registered for VAT and you are buying a VATable product, they are supposed to charge you VAT. So if you have bought something that it's 100 shillings, they will put VAT, it will be 118. You go and compute your margins and you sell it.
At how much?
At say 125. Say 110, 10 is your margin plus VAT. So you'll compute the VAT on the gross sale amount. Now what you take to your is not what you have computed. You will get what you have computed, collected from me, who bought from you, minus what you paid to the manufacturer. And the difference is what you pay.
Consider the cycle I just tried to explain. The shirt is moving. It hasn't been. It hasn't reached the final consumer yet.
That's why it's called value addition. You have to understand the technicality. So if you have moved it from here and taken it to Fort Potro, the value addition is the effort you have taken. Because it's not just going to go free. You've added value. That's why the price will not be the same. The shirt will probably cost you 125 here, but the one in Fort Potro has incurred transport, he has incurred loading and off-roading, he will add his margin. So depending at what at the position in the supply chain where you purchase, the price will include tax and the margin.
What's your reading of this complaint? Because it's coming from you as traders.
No, the concern of the traders is that when we talk about IFRIS, automatically they are trained with VAT. So what is the impact is that they increase the cost of doing business. It's like what the Honorable has stated. The government is holding some of your operational capital for a full month.
No, but let me explain that one because we've dealt with it.
Yes.
There was the Ministry of Finance introduced under the regulations. They introduced what they called withholding VAT, withholding tax on VAT of 6%, which many of us thought it was completely ridiculous. That because VAT, if I buy from Andrew, that withholding percent of 6% they introduced meant that Andrew would withhold 6% on my growth, keep it, and take it in his return the following month. Obviously, it distorts the equation of VAT and stresses my cash flow. So that one we have dealt with it as Parliament, because in our Committee of Finance we thought that goes against the principles of VAT and it is a stress. But the problem is, of course, our colleagues, our traders here, they need to know how to refine their facts very, very well, especially when you are meeting the president. I have a feeling that sometimes when you mix up things and they are not properly refined, you end up actually getting misunderstood. Like you are opposing IFRIS because you think 18% is being charged on you. That generalization without refining where the problems are is part of the reasons why you are getting, you are not getting the solutions you expect.
Just trying to
Yes.
what Honorable Katesh is talking about. The challenge we have is URA knows that many of our traders are illiterate. And what my brother talked about of having the unfair assessments, that is very true. We have a very big problem with URA. They use the law to trap many of our traders and make wrong assessments. I actually have a document here. I think my brother Katesh is going to look at it. From URA. Yesterday, one of the people called me telling me URA, he had a transaction, actually he had a loan with Standard Chartered, and he was losing some other property. So he decided to dispose of his home and move into a rental. So on selling his house, URA sent him that they are supposed to hold 6%. And the person who was telling him, I'm going to withhold the 6%, and then remit it to URA.
His buyer was telling him he had to
withhold 6%, that URA has informed him that they have to withhold 6% of that money. And when I looked at the document, because I was quite surprised, because he was saying,
is that the URA document that you're referring to?
This is the URA document. This is the URA document. So I was surprised, and the gentleman was saying, Honorable, did you already pass the tax on selling houses and land and all that? Because already they are charging. But when I looked at the document, they are quoting a section. I think Honorable Katesh can look at it.
Give it to Honorable Katesh to read
Section
it.
118
Yes.
of the Income Tax Cap 340 as amended, requiring a resident person who purchases a business asset to withhold 6%. So they are looking at someone who has an asset that is doing business. But this is not a residential home. Honorable Katesh can look at it.
It's a personal house, not
It's a personal house. So that is what is happening. So if this gentleman didn't know, or he was not close to Honorable Masaba, who probably knows some bit of the taxation and the tax laws, he would go ahead and do it and pay the taxes.
I can see Professor
so that is
wants to help us now.
There are two things here. One is it's very important to simplify procedures and policies so that anybody who is going to pay tax understands them. But what you see from the various taxpayers is that they don't understand it, and therefore they feel there's something wrong out there. Two, we have a problem in the country. It's not about tax only. It's very important for us to adopt modern technologies to become more efficient. But you see, 80% of our population is outside that. And there's a very simple case of somebody wanting to get a TIN number and has to pay 50,000 shillings to the URA official to be able to get the TIN number. And the TIN number, if you have a phone, you can get it in a few minutes. But that means you must have a phone, you must have internet, and you must understand the procedures. Now, these are increasing the cost to the business person. So it's very important that we actually simplify the laws and procedures to get more people complying with the tax laws. If they are not simple, sorry.
Yes. I want to say just briefly. You know, sometimes Uganda passes laws that actually kill a business. Let me give you an example. Assuming my job is to buy and sell houses. I go and buy a house. That's my job. I'm a real estate dealer. I go and buy a house at 1 billion. And a month later, I sell it 1.2 billion. Right? URA imposes a VAT of 216 million, 18% VAT on the 1.2 billion. Then they put there 60 million capital gains tax. Then have to pay 90 million withholding tax. Because remember, you can never, they say URA will claim that it is your money. You go one day to claim withholding tax. They will audit you and will spend the next 500 years without getting it. So the total bill of taxes you will pay is 348 million. So I bought the house at
$1 billion shillings.
At $1 billion shillings. I sold at 1.2 billion. The taxes you have imposed on me have already followed me back from I am now at 852. How do you make a tax whereby you say, I don't know how Ugandans who buy and sell houses as their business do it? It means they evade tax or avoid it. I don't know. But the tax on real estate is the most stupid system of taxation that has ever existed in humankind.
I have seen URA has now put those notices on commercial rentals, on rentals all over the place. I saw some in the morning driving through my neighborhood, and I've seen some circulating on social media. Rental tax, they're coming hard on that. Honorable Ssemuju, you wanted to come in.
I wanted to go back to where all this started. IFRIS. The complaint of the traders, at least the ones that I interacted with, was that if you sold an item in a shop, there will be a URA agent outside or some meters away demanding to see that receipt. And as a result, I was told by traders, he can bear me witness, that URA was preventing buyers from going into these shops by endlessly, because the person I spoke to told me some of these items are not even being sold. You're moving from one store to another. But if you're going to move them many times in town, at every stage, during every movement, there will be an agent. I think URA had deployed people demanding to look at a receipt. And I think that's what brought this strike by the traders.
And that survive, you're supposed to go Kasao.
I don't understand what it means.
Kasao, it means parting something.
So the enforcement of this new receipting system is what caused the problem that led to the strike. There is a threat of a new strike after the next round of meeting with Museveni.
Or is it that because the traders don't want to be monitored? The example Lemmy was giving, they don't want to be monitored on their transactions.
No, some of the complaint was that some of the items had not even been sold. They were just moving from one shop to another, or from a store to a shop. But URA, each time they see a movement of an item, they're asking for a receipt. Where is the receipt for this one? That's what I was told. I'm not involved in.
Just to add on that, what URA did, they put officers, UPDF officers and URA officials at the entrance and exits of Chikogo. So even if I'm carrying one carton of, even if I'm carrying one box of maybe counter books for my maybe children, I have to show them an e-receipt.
When URA was introducing IFRIS to supermarkets, they deployed an officer to sit at the gate to monitor every receipt of someone who was exiting. Wasn't URA doing just that for purposes of introducing the IFRIS system?
When you are dealing with the supermarket, you are dealing with a formal business.
Very organized system.
The business downtown are not as formal as a supermarket. But I wanted to develop my point before you. So that's where this particular strike and confrontation with the state started. The enforcement of the new receipting system. But I want to pose two new things, Charles. First, these traders are not the ones who are paying taxes. The taxes are being paid by the consumers. The trouble is that business has slowed down in Chikuwo and the neighboring areas. Part of the reason the business has slowed down is the performance of the economy itself. Because even if you increase the tax, I don't think Thaddeus buys goods and then he sells those goods to himself. If there are people buying them, I don't think you'll have traders complaining. But if you go downtown, you'll find empty shops. People have closed, the businesses are not working. And in fact, I think consumers should be the ones who are protesting. Because if you increase the price of a pair of a jean that was at 25,000 to 40,000, and there are many customers who are entering the shops and buying, I don't think Thaddeus will be on the street protesting. So the economy has slowed down. And I told Thaddeus here during the break that Mr. Museveni and the government are desperate. This financial year, let me start with last financial year. The projection was for URA to correct 29 trillion. They corrected 23. Next financial year.
So there were 6 trillion below target.
Next financial year, URA had projected again 29 at the beginning of the budget process in December. But because government has many items to finance in the budget, I think they took on the job of projecting. So they now have projected 31 trillion. I don't think URA has done this because from 2 months after presentation of the first parliamentary document, budget document, they have revised the projection by 2 trillion. The trouble is that URA, even when you look at their figures now, I think this financial year, the one we are about to conclude in June, URA thinks they will collect about 26 trillion. In the budget, next financial year, government needs about 25 trillion for debt servicing. Nearly all the money that you are collecting now is going into debt servicing. When you're interacting with the Minister of Finance in our committee, he said they thought they will advertise and get money, get lenders in the open market to lend government money. But he said now money in Europe, in US, you need to pay 10%. And he said we can no longer buy, we can no longer borrow money. So the government is in a crisis. That Museveni that was speaking to others in Koro, understand, he's a desperate man. He needs to service the debt. The amount of money URA is collecting is consumed by debt servicing. Yet, he needs to stay in power by doing many things. So even if you protest, maybe when you close shops, and it's a point I made when I was presenting a report in Parliament, because the finance committee itself is not going to be driven just by revenue correction. They're going to care about the growth of the economy. So they need to balance both. So you don't want the traders to close shops because then there will be nothing you are correcting. But you also want to correct taxes. That's why they have deployed now 2,000 UPDF soldiers who are working with URA. So it's going to be at gunpoint that you guys must pay tax.
Reverend Grace Lubale, the doctor, is saying too much taxation cannot cause economic development. Economic development in Uganda will be achieved by good governance, equity, resource allocation, reduced corruption, and researched economic policies. So you continue to conclude.
To conclude the point I was making, I read Daniel Kainaki this morning, and he made that point. You need to show, because everybody who's paying taxes, if I pay taxes, what are you showing? What are you giving me in return? I looked at last time here with Andrew and others, we were discussing the wage bill. I was looking at local government this morning. You have a budget of 6 trillion for local governments in Uganda. 3.3 trillion of that 6 trillion local government budget is for wages. 1 trillion is for buying fuel and facilitating people who are working in local government. At the end of the day, you spend 6 trillion in local government that have broken roads, broken bridges. You come at the center, you do the same thing. You have near about 8 trillion in wages and vehicle and this and that. So a trader in Kampala that you want to pay a tax, why should I pay a tax and I move on roads that are broken down? My car is stuck. I look at myself as a member of parliament. Okay, you must be clean. You must, every day you are washing a vehicle at 20,000 every day. So here, until government, so I am looking at it
through this Nigeria road.
Yes.
You drive through Ntinda.
Yes, sometimes.
Where you're going.
Sometimes.
So how many times are you replacing your? How much time are you spending in the garage?
When you read the domestic revenue mobilization strategy by Minister of Finance, it speaks about all these things. In fact, in a letter by Matia Kasaye, the Minister of Finance, he says resource mobilization in the future now is going to depend on how much service the government is offering to citizens. He says that. So when you are hunting down Kasita for a freeze for this, they are going to ask you guys, are you doing what you are supposed to be doing using the money that you are collecting from us?
It's actually
so the relationship between that, first, government is desperate, it needs money, it has a debt to service. Sometimes it may not even have, nothing remains to go and invest in roads and invest in that. One time I was joking, telling these colleagues who are NRM that Museveni is lucky, he has a whole division to guard him. If he was an ordinary trader, by now he would be he would be at CPS. You can't pay local suppliers. Now domestic areas is at the areas is at 10 trillion.
Domestic areas.
Yeah, you have areas at 10 trillion. You have a debt in the budget, next financial year's budget, out of 10 trillion of suppliers, including some of the traders, government has put 200 billion. So the services that people have offered to you, government, worth 10 trillion. In the budget, you are putting 200 billion to pay. You have banks that are knocking at your door every day. So we are dealing with a desperate situation. Unfortunately, we are not behaving like
desperate times require desperate action.
So I don't know.
We have forgotten. We also have, and these people don't notice, government has contingent liabilities in the court of 18 trillion, and often 30% of those actual people win. So that is another 6 trillion in contingent liabilities, about 8 trillion in domestic arrears, then 8 trillion in rolled over debt.
Next year is 12.
Oh man.
I'll let Thaddeus conclude his thought, but then we go back to the question of the services that come out of these taxes.
Something on the VAT, which I thought.
Okay, let me read this for you because it's also written for you.
Yes.
Honorable Kateshumba is failing to understand the concept of VAT, and I'm not surprised that we have no tax policy. VAT can't be infinite. VAT is paid by the final consumer. This has made the products and services more expensive. The manufacturer, in essence, loses because the final consumer's purchasing power goes down because their incomes have not increased. Manufacturers have no choice but to go to the market to have their products which they can sell cheaply. I need Thaddeus to come in and then Honorable come to you.
Okay.
Then
Thank you, Charles. I'll be interested in hearing from him how they are faring. Do they have customers? Is the problem the tax or the customers not being available?
let Thaddeus speak.
Like I said, we had several challenges which we presented, but basing on the presentations of my comrades here on the panel, it's like the traders are being misunderstood. First of all, we presented the issue of failure to utilize the regional market. The fact is that it's answering the question of Honorable Ssemuju. A failure for the regional market, it has a direct impact on our sales. The moment the taxes are high, what's going to happen is that the neighboring countries can no longer purchase commodities from here. I want to give a scenario. We have our structures of the traders' leadership, just from Bali. They cannot purchase our own cement. They prefer buying cement from Kenya because Ugandan taxes are high. We have a bigger challenge of the cost of doing business in Uganda. Unless the government addresses the cost of doing business in Uganda, it is facilitating high-class smuggling, and even is failing compliance. By the way, at times when people are arguing our concerns, I try to stay silent because they are ignorant about what is happening downtown. When Honorable Kateshumba was presenting, when he used to be in URA, we used to have several interactions with him. One time I remember a scenario, I don't know if he remembers, when we were at Imperial Royale, almost the traders wanted to struggle him from that side for unfair policies, but because he was so strategic, there is a way he handled the crowd of the traders. So we are engaging him because now, luckily enough, he's into also private sector. But the concern of the trader is so clear. Before you introduce any system or project, can you engage the stakeholders? Can they have their input? So one question is, why is it that when the system of URA has shortcomings, there are no penalties which the traders can refer to URA? But any shortcoming
on the trader
side, penalty 6 million. I had a scenario, one of my members, a techno shop owner at Kampala Road, he decided to comply. So the manager wanted to cheat the owner. So when the manager wanted to cheat one phone for around 1 million, The manager sold it at 1.8. The guy who bought that phone forwarded the receipt to URA. Just imagine, URA fined this owner of the shop 6 million, but he was innocent. He was totally innocent. He had to fire the manager. So URA is trying now to see, how do we modify the system? How do we get the feedback from the traders? So at times, some people were saying that, what did we gain from the engagement from Kololo? By the way, we gained, I don't know, legally, maybe it's not gain, but if the president stopped implementing of penalties and areas,
You count that as a gain?
that's a gain.
Okay.
Because we have some issues we're supposed to handle. Like we have what we call dead stock. If I have dead stock, how do I start bargaining for my VAT?
Okay.
So we have issues which I think we have to handle. Secondly, why are the traders against the IFRI system? How do you introduce a project within the stakeholders if they are not involved? So the perception is totally so negative.
Okay.
There is no way you can bring guns and you forcefully enforce Musoke to go on IFRIs. We need to have flexible means
Of course.
of interesting members of the business community
Gentlemen, I'm
to adopt the new system.
Yes, I need to give Katesh 2 minutes, then we'll take a break and then we'll come back to discuss the...
For me, I think we need to have a separation between matters of policy and matters of administration. On the policy front, I think the Minister of Finance has an obligation to sit back and review some of the policies. For example, the issue of the law. You know, if we need to look at the penalty as Parliament, and the Ministry of Finance, it's not too late for them to say, look, this penalty maybe it is a bit far-fetched. We can have a recommendation.
But do you think, Katesh, that if you have a crisis of low revenue,
Yes.
you're looking to every possible place to get some money, so the penalty comes in handy
Yeah, but
as non-tax.
You asked the question about you know, the penalty could arise out of a mistake that is not self-created. There are other things in the law. For example, 2 years ago, I think if I'm not mistaken, we had to amend the people who are doing business with government, and they have issued invoices, but they have not been paid for years. And you find someone has a contract, he has borrowed money, he invoices, and the moment you invoice, it creates an obligation for you to charge VAT. So URA would be knocking on your door. While the payments should, so we had to introduce an amendment to allow people to do cash accounting. But now, are there other sectors? For example, in the hotel sector, are there, if someone goes to, if you are giving services to say an NGO or let's say NBS here, and you issue an invoice, are you getting paid immediately, or you have to borrow money, pay
URA,
and then you demand later? There are other things like the threshold. I mean, the debate has been on for many years. The threshold has been there for years. That is something that we can also look at from a policy side. And then
there's that question about VAT that someone also asked you about.
Yes.
That you need to respond to before we take a break.
Now, like I mentioned, you see, VAT is value added tax. At if you incur it, you offset it when you charge it. So if I may buy from you, but I'm not going to be the final consumer. I have intentions of selling it, right? You will charge me, and if I'm VAT registered and I'm required to charge to account for VAT, when I sell, I will charge and offset. So it does not mean that when you sell, the person who has been charged VAT is not necessarily the final consumer of the product. You could actually stock goods for resale. So the question is, would you be targeting everyone below the threshold and saying, let's go full scale, whether you are below the threshold, you are supplying capital shoppers, you are supplying anywhere, you are expected to come with an IFRIS receipt. That should be the discussion.
Let's come to that discussion after a very short break. I'll take a message from George Muhimza, who says, one of the challenges in our economy is that the biggest population who aren't in the money economy, which means low purchasing power. So as the government squeezes traders to pay more taxes, there is no increased demand from the consumers. This explains why Chinese cheap products are in high demand, e.g. shoes, sandals, commonly known as bagagawale. What is government doing to increase people's purchasing power? For example, Iran imports 7 million tons of maize. Recently, Egypt wanted a supply of feed 9 million tons of maize. Uganda produces 5 million tons annually. If we could double that production itself by another 5 tons, at a rate of 2,000 shillings per kg, would add another 2 trillion into our economy. If we did the same on coffee, cassava, etc., would have more people with high purchasing power, and then we would attract investment in agro-processing, hence more revenue. George Muhimbise. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll look at where do the taxes go? Are the people getting the services that they need? And are they incentivized to pay the taxes? Same source. Lastly, not everyone downtown is a wholesaler. Some are really small by EDV. IFRIS is literally for everyone. I have another person who actually is asking the same question that I need to raise. Kelly Wanda. Kelly Wanda sent me a message. I'm looking for Kelly's message because he's asking the same questions about those who are below the threshold and those above the threshold. Do they buy from the same source? How do you deal with the two different types of people? Andrew, let me come back. We have very little time to end the show. Andrew, the biggest question people are asking, if we are working on roads as broken as they are, if the health system is not providing health care, if the education system is what it is, that people have to pay taxes, supposedly to facilitate good education, but they still have to subsidize government because they have to educate their children in private schools. How do you even convince people that taxation is good?
Well, and I think that is the challenge that Uganda faces. If you have to make people be tax compliant, they must see the fruits of their taxes in terms of public goods and services that are provided. If you really live in Kampala and you know the quality of roads that are in Kampala, you ask yourself, why should anyone in Kampala pay taxes? Now, remember that Kampala contributes 75% of total tax revenue. Am I correct? Kampala and Wakiso district, 75%. And they contribute around 65% of GDP. In this budget that we have, I think Uganda put about 4 trillion shillings into the budget for roads. But the budget for Kampala roads is 40 trillion. So they give Kampala 1%. The Kampala and Wakiso contribute 75% of the taxes, and they only get 1% of the budget for roads. I mean, I don't know what our policymakers think. And you know, sometimes I want to blame Museveni, but that's myself. Okay, Museveni is one human being. We have a permanent secretary, secretary of treasury, a minister for finance, minister of general duties, members of parliament who sit on the budget committee. I was with them in Munyonyo, they were reading the budget. We have the opposition MPs. There's a whole paraphernalia. I don't know whether if so many people in the Ministry of Finance, Director of Budget, PS, Deputy PS, ministers, and all this, and then all the members of Parliament who sit on the Budget Committee, and all, if they sit, all of them live in Kampala, drive on the bad road and so forth. If they sat and said, Mr. President, the situation in Kampala has reached a critical point, I don't think that Museveni is so insensitive to listen. Now, when I went to Munyonyo and I found this, the Budget Committee of Parliament seated, there are about 68 of them, it's the largest committee of Parliament. So Ssemuju wants a road in his village in Utambala. Katechumba here, he wants it in Shema. Mwenda in Kanyanda. So all these MPs who sit there, everybody's pulling to. Now,
take a road to your place.
But the MPs of Kampala do not sit in the cabinet, do not sit in the budget committee. They cannot pull resources where they can get votes now. Given a chance between Kateshumba being re-elected by taking a project to Shema and him losing the election because Kampala roads are fixed, He would prefer to drive his Land Cruiser through bad roads of Kampala and take the project to Shema. That is the politics of Kampala.
Does he find a good road in Shema when he goes to Shema?
Actually, let me tell you this, Charles, you'll be surprised. Actually, Uganda has very good national trunk roads. And if you go to upcountry towns, if you go to Fort Portal, you go to Mbarara, you go to Masaka, Mbale, Soroti, Lira, Hoima, okay, there the road is getting worse, and the one of Fort Portal. But by and large, I should say, Uganda has invested better in its national trunk roads and even municipal roads. This Kampala, I'm telling you, is being punished. And is being punished by two things.
And who is punishing the people who use the Metiana Mubende Chenjojo Road? Who is punishing those?
Well, I think that in any society, I would imagine that even if you went to Norway, you may find some things that don't work. So I can understand some roads may not work. But by and large, Uganda has invested better in national trunk roads.
Someone else is asking a question and says, government MDAs, are they registered for IFRIS? They should be part of the loop of IFRIS. Are they registered? Are they compliant if they're registered? But the question I want to put to you, when you worked at URA doesn't want to explain, doesn't want to get involved in saying this is where your taxes go. But you have a country that is burdened by very high debt and broken down infrastructure. How do you convince people to be compliant?
Of course, you see, government has to make the URA's work much easier. Like you see, if you look at, for example, indirect taxes, they are as a result of increased consumption. Increased consumption happens because people have disposable income to spend on. So the question is, how many people in Shema can drink a bottle of soda in a month? If they are able to drink, obviously that is easy VAT. So now, so now the question is, who is responsible to make sure that the people's, the more people that get out of poverty and are able to have disposable income are productive, it makes it easy for increased consumption and of course indirectly contributes to revenue. So that's why many of us who sit in Parliament, his colleagues here on the budget committee, we've been saying investments in the budget to say, look, let's focus on productive sectors where we invest and we expect that the investment we have made will generate more money, will lead to more money into people's pockets. That's why sometimes, I know the budget structure, there is little money left for development expenditure. But the little that is there, if we are talking of programs like PDM, let it be front-loaded. You cannot be releasing money for PDM in the third quarter, fourth quarter. It will not generate money for you in the year. You know, so we've been calling upon government, Ministry of Finance, to say, look, for money that goes directly into generating money directly, let those programs be front-loaded. Secondly,
isn't that one way government is stretching itself by trying to put money where it shouldn't be putting it, instead of putting money where it facilitates people to make their own money?
Of course, now look at, for example, areas. You know, if you meet people who have done business with government, they were looking at the budget for the infrastructure committee, and you have UNRWA with over 1 trillion areas, and there is no money allocated for areas. So where does it leave someone who perhaps went and leased his, mortgaged his house, got a loan, and did a project, and then he's not paid 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So this is where we are saying also, you see, if government doesn't pay the suppliers, the contractors, how would URA collect money from them? You have people who supplied seedlings for tea. Many years, government gave people seedlings through NADS, and it led to massive growth, massive production in the tea sector in your area. Now the story is changing that, look, the world market for tea, went down, so we should have gone slow, looked at other crops. But we've already incurred investments in the tea sector.
There was an exhibition at Kololo,
yes,
and an expert, one of the guys who's an expert in tea, has, I think, 150 acres, was there in a booth, And the senior government official apparently told him, said, what do I tell the farmers, the tea farmers then? And the senior government official told him, if people are growing tea, tell them to cut it, we shall advise them on what else to grow.
You see, so this is why we are saying, for example, can't we do small things like maybe subsidize fertilizers, increase the processing lines, look at the tea policy, start doing our tea auction instead of doing it through Mombasa. So for me, I think there is a room for government. The government, URA on its own, without government doing certain things, the work becomes very, very difficult.
What do you see as your role as members of parliament?
Our role, of course, I think we have to look at certain laws and amend. I have told my colleagues, for example, we need to amend the Public Finance Management Act. When we are looking at the budgeting process, we look at the budget framework paper, we receive it way back during the half year, and we start scrutinizing the budget framework paper, we look at the ministerial, but there is no conversation around policy, tax policy, until the latter months when we are under pressure. So we are saying that maybe we need to amend the PFMA to say we should start the two processes concurrently, so that we look at policies that can actually generate, not necessarily tax policies that will bring money immediately, but policies that could enable the economy to lead to more future money, more future taxes. So there are certain things that we must maybe unlearn and redo separately, so that we appear to be more organized and we handle things parallel. We cannot be discussing the budget on one hand for 6 months. You are thinking about the expenditure, but you are not thinking about the source of the money you are going to spend until later when you already have a budget. That's why the budget keeps changing. I don't think even now we know. Because
so you draw a long wish list of the things you want to do and then go to look for the money to do it.
Then you start looking for the money. That's why we keep having corrigendas. I think even this weekend we should be expecting a corrigenda to the budget. We don't know exactly what will be the budget until I think maybe Monday, because things keep changing, demands keep changing. And at no time do you have a parallel process that goes to think about where will you get money. Remember, Charles, if the GDP does not expand, you have even a problem with the borrowing, because you are trying to borrow against your GDP. So if there is a shrinking growth or a growth that is not what we expect, then your ability to borrow beyond a certain level, then we start becoming very uncomfortable.
Okay.
So we must take care of the economy.
Answer the quick question about government MDAs and IFRS.
Of course, they should be charging, and I do not have facts about their level of compliance, but I think that maybe URA would have a better update in terms of compliance with government. But these people who man MDAs are a reflection of our society, because we have people who have areas of taxes when they actually collected the pay as you earn, but because of the budget constraints and pressures, they actually use the money, and you find they are asking for a write-off, and they are MDAs of government.
They want to cause them with the money before they can pass it on. Honorable Masaba,
Yes.
If a government, Ssemuju described it as desperate for money, it doesn't have enough money to run. Andrew was running through running you through the numbers of what money government needs to pay its debt, run government, meet all this. Can it have room to think through and say, long term, this is what we need to do?
Yes, of course. I think I'll begin with the two issues that I didn't get a chance to talk about. The one, the IFRS and threshold. One of the gentlemen actually who texted said IFRS is more of a camera that is coming to streamline. Yes, it's a camera, but most of us do support football. And when you go into a football match and you already have a red card, so even if you have the best and the most fair referee on the pitch, it will become very hard for you to win a game. So that is what is happening. That why aren't the manufacturers and the investors complaining about IFRS? Because they are already they have an advantage over the locals. So it is very hard for our people to compete with them. That is where the issue is coming about. But I think if we can first level the ground, then we can look at how to put more people into compliance. The second issue was about the threshold. When you look at this threshold, 150 million shillings, when it was set, it was a lot of money, and my brother here will agree. Probably by then, you would go and buy maybe 5 containers or 3 containers. But right now, 150, you'll find it's able to bring 1 container. I remember when we were doing the investigation into a NSSF, one of the witnesses came and said, I think 100 shillings by then used to buy a bull, but 100 shillings cannot buy some parts currently. So that is the situation right now. Honestly speaking, I think we need to revise the threshold, and it's one of the key issues that we did discuss in our committee, because the future and present value of money are different. 150 million 10 years ago is not the 150 right now. So when you talked about the issue of government and what they are doing right or wrong, one of the key issues that I believe is we have wrong priorities as a country. And usually the public out there does blame members of parliament, but at times it's beyond our control. Because, for example, the issue that comes under the classified expenditure, you'll have a budget and you're spending over 3.7 trillion shillings under classified, but I'm barred by the law. I'm not allowed to even look at it. It is supposed to come as a single budget line. So there is literally nothing I can do. The executive is given liberty to come with supplementary budgets at any time that they do want, and they actually do spend under the law and then come and report back to parliament. So at times, it becomes challenging for us as members of parliament. When you look at, say, for example, this current financial year that we are running, you will see that government has planned to give one individual about 170 billion shillings. That is their investment. Then you'll go and see at YAC, actually I'm told they are bringing another supplementary to do irrigation, mechanization, and something to do with pumping water from the Nile up to their plantation for about 400 billion shillings. That is something we've been informed that is coming. But again, on the same hand, I have a regional referral hospital in Mbale, which is serving over 3 million people. Government had come up with an initiative to build an ICU unit and a surgical complex. It is at about 95%. We are left with, we need about 5 billion shillings to complete this structure. But the same government is telling you, we do not have the money. There is no money to complete. So what are our priorities? What is government's priorities? I think we need government to become serious at times. So you're better off giving one individual 700 billion and you cannot provide 5 billion that can save. Because when you look at the referral, even the oxygen plant is down and government cannot come in and renovate and put in place this. So it's quite challenging where our priorities as government, and I think we need to have a wider discussion. The president usually when he comes in Mbale, he has a presidential lodge in senior quarters. So he passes the best streets, Republic Street up to senior quarters. He will not know the status of the roads in Mbale, but it's quite alarming. 3 kilometers outside the CBD, outside Mbale city, you cannot find any kilometer of a paved road, apart from the highways that link to Soroti, Tororo, and Iganga. Those are the only good roads and the Osmit. So once you move beyond town, you'll face the bitter reality that we are facing as a country, and you wonder, what are our priorities as a country?
What are our priorities as a country, Professor?
We need to put money into education. If you want to grow a middle class, you should be able to have people who have demand, and of course, education infrastructure. But there's something we're not talked about. Are we able to earn good money out of what we produce? Have we untangled the agreements that we're exporting coffee and cotton on, which allow us to take the raw material rather than the value-added product? If we put money into that and we can produce local products here, we will give more money to the farmer. And if you do the value addition here, you are creating an additional job that is driving you towards middle income. So, and of course, a smaller government. I am a believer in small government. Low taxes, small government, the economy will thrive. Yes.
How do you achieve a small government in our circumstances? Because it must be, you must place it within the context
Yes,
were
yes,
running.
yes.
We're looking at the numbers the other day.
Yes.
A lot of people focus on members of parliament. You have about 529 of you guys?
Yes.
529.
Yes, 529 members of parliament.
Yes.
But total number of elected officials. I did interview the chairperson of the electoral commission the other day. And we have about 2.9 elected officials. And my question is, how many other people do they supervise? You go to Ministry of Finance, you have about 4 ministers supervising one permanent secretary.
Well,
Yes,
the side of
five.
the side of government is parliament, is the districts. I mean, recently this debacle about the RDCs. You have 145 districts, so you need 145 RDCs with their deputies and assistants. And when you go to parliament, you see that the budget is for salaries, vehicles, and fuel. And after that, I understand they have nothing else to do in the districts, because there's no more money there. So we need to rationalize government. I believe
That's what we need to do. That's my question.
Yes.
We need to, can we?
it's a political question. It's a political question.
Who answers that political question?
The party, the NRM party. These are ideological issues. The size of government is an ideological issue. The NRM party, the members of the party should sit down and decide what do they want. Do they want a big government? Do they believe in big government? Do they believe that it's big government, big government creating jobs for RDCs instead of creating more businesses, which you can tax? These are the issues. The NRM, which is my party, we should put our act together. Sit down, agree on ideological issues. What do we want to see? We want to see more businesses grow, so the money should go into growth of businesses. The money, we should reduce taxes so that we can have more people paying taxes more willingly. We shall have more taxes. And the research is there. The research will tell you countries which have lowered their tax rates tend to have bigger economies because the investor has more money to him to invest and creates more jobs which are also taxable.
Andrew, when you look at this government, the size of it, where we spend the money is potentially a bigger question than where the money is being collected from. Because if the leakages are bigger than how much you're bringing in, you have a crisis. But from what he's saying, can we rationalize government where we are now? Is it possible?
I think that he answered it well. So that's a political question. Because the political survival of the government of President Museveni depends on them co-opting a large cross-section of powerful and influential elites. Like my friends, the Ssemujus, if you go into the market for Ugandans with a profile, a national stature, skills of leadership and organization and mobilization, in that market, Museveni has crowded the opposition out. He has practically appointed everybody presidential advisor, an RDC or something. So if they're looking for candidates to go and run in constituencies, the opposition can't find them. That's how he has emasculated them. And if I was in Museveni's shoes, I would exactly do the same thing, because that is how he's able to sustain and reproduce political power. So I don't see how Museveni is unlikely to organize his own political funeral. So he can only keep expanding the patronage pie as far as it can allow him to deny the opposition individuals who can provide them also a large number of candidates for constituencies and stuff like that.
Katesh, you're a member of the National Resistance Movement. And the question is, you're spending way too more as a government and as a party in power. You're spending way too more on non-productive areas, and which is largely the political class.
But
how do you deal with that?
I think for me, when you don't have money, you start asking questions. I think we have reached a point where, because of the budgetary deficit that we are experiencing, this conversation is coming back on the table. Because when we were discussing rationalization, for example, of government agencies, the questions were saying, okay, if we rationalize government agencies, put them in the ministries, but what about the ministries? So this is a very good discussion where we should be looking at, this huge political establishment, the wage bill, can we sustain it going forward? Because if you look at the debt and then you look at the operations of government, you know, the funny thing is, when we are considering these supplementaries, you find someone bringing wage shortfall as part of a supplementary. And the question is, you know, was this unknown? And was it unforeseen? It was foreseen, it was known, but perhaps there is no money. So money is diverted to do something else that is urgent, but there is a deficit. So for me, the discussion is alive because we have a huge budgetary deficit and we can no longer hide our heads in the sand. We have to start thinking about how do we rationalize our political structure to be able to fit within the funds that we have. So it's a good discussion, because if we don't get money from oil in the next few years, definitely we are going to be in a much deeper crisis. So we have to start thinking about where do we do savings, including Parliament, including the executive, including all these other structures. Because now when you go to the local governments, you see councillors are demanding for a pay, LOC ones are demanding for a pay. At the end of the day,
and the vehicle.
we are, of course, vehicles. Can we sustain ourselves?
You've received a request from the Minister for Gender, Labour and Cultural Affairs to pay cultural leaders, 60 million. And there are 17.
Yeah,
and I'm told there's a proposal also to buy vehicles for the prime ministers of the cultural institutions.
We are a very consumptive society. So definitely the question is, can we afford it going forward? Because if you find that your revenues largely are going into paying debt, then where do you and capital is becoming more expensive. The minister will tell you
where is that conversation happening? That's my question.
Perhaps it is happening in meetings that I don't attend, but I think even the people who are listening, some of the decision makers, they must be asking themselves, where do we go from here? Can we continue to borrow? The money is becoming expensive to borrow. Even locally, if you enter into the market so much, like Andrew mentioned, you are crowding out the private sector and crippling the growth. So we have to have that conversation.
Okay. Xavier is watching us and says, Parliament passes tax bills every year. Can MPs and the experts in the studio tell viewers how much revenue the country loses through tax exemptions and tax holidays? I have seen prominent hotels in Kampala present invoices stamped VAT exempt. Why would anyone approve VAT exemption to a luxury hotel when the ultimate tax liability is not met by the hotel? Xavier Joy is asking that question. Do you have an answer for him, Andrew?
Well,
for example, 75% of all imports in Uganda are tax exempt. And tax exemptions are a very big challenge for Uganda, because practically I had explained this earlier, every investor who comes insists that they should give them tax exemptions. And as I said, government provides so many facilities at taxpayer expense for an investor. So if an investor does not pay their fair share of taxes, it means the net return from their investment could even be negative. And Uganda needs to do that cost-benefit analysis of these tax exemptions. Actually, the World Bank and IMF have advised the government of Uganda to avoid tax exemptions. But these are very political decisions. Assuming somebody came and contributed money to the campaign of the NRM and in exchange they ask for a tax exemption, how do you resist something like that?
Okay. Juma Kadri is watching us and says, Uganda as a country, we have not reached the last stage of economic growth in mass consumption, and therefore administering ambiguous tax policies where almost most of its population is below the poverty line would rather damage its tax base and also scaring off investors. I'm not sure I understand the message, Juma Kadri. Dr. Msoke, government needs to expand the tax base, must collect more money to be able to provide the services. How are your traders supporting this?
Mainly, we as the traders, we decided to strategize with a diversification strategy. So the diversification strategy is facilitating traders to migrate from being ordinary traders into local manufacturers. So with this, it means that the more you expand, it means that your tax capacity also increases. So that's our strategy. And secondly, we are trying to engage the government to make sure that it doesn't overtax the traders, but also can it tax other comrades in the private sector. Let me give a scenario. You find like for the trader, when you import a container, you pay 35%, you pay 1.5%, that is infrastructure, environment, that's 1.5. Then you pay, also you have to pay for VAT, then withholding 6%. So you find that the government is overtaxing traders. And then also we are championing, like I'm happy, my comrade was presenting that can the tax focus, can the government focus on non-tax incentives than tax incentives, because we have discovered that most of even the companies after 10 years of existence, they change their brand names to another name. Let me give just a scenario. There is a very big Chinese company. Was it called Zhang Furniture something around Shibuya?
Yes.
Zing. But currently, when you pass by, already the name has changed. You know, when we presented this to the Permanent Secretary Minister of Finance, he told us, but you can see that you allege a lot. But you give us examples. We have availed examples, but no action was done. At one time, there is a gentleman I heard on a certain radio station telling us that for us traders, we just jump on these small guys. And they told us that you come to the big guy, it's just him and the president. When we went to the big man, we discovered also is a small man. So, you know, sometimes when people are in government, they try to think that they are so big. And they think they're going to die when they're in government. But for us, we are just appealing to our comrades who are in parliament and in government, like when they are in their positions, can they try to lobby for fairness into the business trading environment? Because this one employs more and facilitates the government to achieve the revenue, maybe it may set or target. So we need to still engage more different stakeholders in this government and Uganda to make sure that we change the perception.
Okay.
But currently there is a lot of negative perceptions towards traders. That for us we just aim at profit maximization, and that's not a crime.
Yes.
But
isn't that?
But can you facilitate me to profit maximize so that my profits are reinvested into this economy?
What about your consumer?
But then, no,
when do you think about
no,
your
that
consumer?
one we can handle later. But I'm telling you this, just there is a point I'm trying to drive. Because even the Chinese do the same. They aim at profit maximization, but they just repatriate that profit to their countries of origin. But then for the consumer, the fact is we are trying to make sure that we consider the pricing to be fair. The moment you overprice, that is that myopic approach. The more strategic approach is to make sure that you avail fair prices so that you win royalty from your customers and even the brand equity. So we are trying to sell and to those principles of trade to our members as Kasita.
Zaitun is an affected taxpayer and says, my concern is, this is for all, says, my concern is, all frontliners seem to agree that the tax regime is unfair to traders, and that is true. But why not focus on the remedies for growing the tax base by putting money in the sectors that can bring in more taxes, such as tourism, cut down government expenditure, whip corruption, affordable finance? And this is a question she's putting to you, members of parliament. Ssemuju.
I think as I answered the earlier question, I have a feeling Mr. Museveni has driven us into a crisis that he will have no option but to continue with the rationalization. So he may not stop at government agencies. Look, the Electoral Commission, in their strategic plan, 2-year strategic plan, they want 2.3 trillion to prepare for general elections in 2 years' time. They think they will need 1.3 trillion to organize the elections. In the budget, they have been given 150 billion. They wanted to begin their preparations this year, next financial beginning with July. Only 150 billion has been provided out of the 2.3 trillion they are asking. If you're going to spend 25 trillion on debt servicing next year, and the projection is that you may not go beyond 26, 27 trillion revenue correction, it means we'll have no option. I said earlier, you are spending about 4 trillion on wages and facilitation vehicles and fuel on local government, the structure of leaders and staff. There is little service that you're extending. When Guru, Dr. SG, in our ongoing consultations, I looked at the budget of Guru City. Guru City has a budget, I think, of about 25 billion. But the development component of that budget is 1 million.
1 million?
Yes. The roads that Andrew was speaking about earlier in the municipalities have been done using a loan from the World Bank under a program called USMID. In the Guru, with that funding, their budget was 43 billion. Now that funding has ended, so the budget has gone back to normal. But the entire budget is salary.
Was the luckier city. It was able to use its USMID money better than the other cities that benefited from
Even
USMID.
Arua did.
I think Gulu, Arua, Mbale to some extent. I think Lira struggled, Fort Porto struggled, and they cut it off. Masaka has done something.
So, but for me, the point, you go to Guru, you have a 25 billion budget, which is largely salaries for schools, health workers, and then the development, the development component of that budget is 1 million. They simply cannot maintain those roads that have been done. 2 years down the road, they will be in the same position that Kampala is in. So I think we may inevitably, even Museveni may have, even if he wants to continue running a very big structure that affords him to campaign in every corner of the country. If you have no money to pay them, if you have no money to service the debt, we've been, by the way, defaulting. The last 3 years we've been defaulting on the debt. Even the interest for these commercial banks where we go and borrow money from, to international lenders, to foreign lenders, our foreign debt. 2 years ago, they had to encroach on our reserves. So we're at a point where rationalization, even if the debate or discussion is not taking place, the amount of money available will force it. You will no longer have capacity to pay them, maintain a wage of 3.3 trillion for local government, another about 5 for working at the center. So that's where we are now. And I think this policy, the piecemeal policy they brought to rationalize government agencies, may eventually have to deal with the rest of the government. Yeah, they brought a motion in Parliament about vehicles. I said at one time Rwanda was moving towards the zero fleet. I don't know if they completed it. The Minister for Public Service asked Parliament to allow him to go and do more studies. I went for a meeting with them, and he told me they don't know how many vehicles government has. He says, we are going to do a study, then we'll tell you, but we don't know how many vehicles we are running.
But a study was done about 10, 15 years ago on the government fleet? It was.
There is no study.
There was a study that was done. They found, I think, 3,000 vehicles parked in the Ministry of Health. Some of them
No,
not
it's not
functional?
possible. They can't fit there. 3,000 vehicles, you can't park them there.
across the country.
Yes, infrastructure.
Yes. So when I went to meet Muluri Mukasa at the ministry, because I moved the motion, he told me we don't know how many vehicles we have. He said the first thing we need to do before you propose for reducing the vehicles is even to know how many do we have. And he said we don't know.
Is it possible that Honorable Muluri Mukasa actually didn't know that the study existed? Because there's a study. When government passed a policy and said government vehicles should be parked in the evening,
Yes.
and they shouldn't be found on the road on weekends, it was coming out of some study.
I don't know. Sometimes this government can announce a policy without a study. That one, I have not seen that study. I would be glad to share it.
Professor, we're moving towards wrapping up the discussion. When government is not finding enough money to even service its debt, it means, and service its debt, meet its recurrent expenditure with very little for development, for the development budget, it means it's going to go back to treasury bonds. What is the implication of that to expanding the tax base by getting more money into the people who are supposed to be putting it to use and multiplying it?
Government borrowing takes away money from the economy again. So it's a complicated thing. That if you issue treasury bills, you are mopping up money in the economy. So it means the investors, the people who want to borrow the money will not find it. The solution, as I've said, lies in expanding the tax base. The tax base is having more business people in the economy. This must be a deliberate effort. And we should also target the production of local goods, because the poverty, for instance, in the Busoga region that you see is because the cotton production declined, coffee production declined. Can you produce more, and can you be more efficient at producing these things? If you're more efficient, you will have some income for these people in these areas. Now, related to that is the issue of education. As long as you have young girls leaving school at the age 13, 14, they're going to deliver babies. And this increases the poverty levels in our country, and it creates more demand on government to find resources to deal with those people. And because he doesn't have the money, you will see more poverty in our midst. And there's another problem. Our attitude to business, mindset to business as a country is something we must deal with. Why don't we have Ugandan companies listed on the stock exchange? Why is the culture of joint stock business very poor in this country? As long as that mindset...
How are you incentivizing it? How is government policy incentivizing investment in those areas?
No, first of all, it's a mindset change on the Ugandan, and I must thank the current traders, the current businessmen, because they're trying. But why am I and my grandfather not in business? Because we have the knowledge, we can access funds, but we don't have those big businesses. Why don't we have the Ugandan companies listed on the Uganda Stock Exchange? I think what we have are Kenyan companies and possibly South African companies listed there. And as long as...
Let me give you an example of a Ugandan company listed on the stock exchange. When Cipla Quality Chemicals listed in 2017, it sold its share at 256.5 shillings. Yes. Today, that share is selling for 53 shillings. What is the incentivization for me or for anybody to invest their money there? They have lost how much? What percentage have they lost of their equity?
80%.
No, that's a lot more than 80%.
And this in a context where the company's performance has been improving, it's making more profit and paying dividends, but because the stock exchange in Uganda
that's market valuation. Yeah. The price, the valuation of General Motors, which produces value so much, is much smaller than the valuation of Tesla. Yeah, I mean, these are market valuations.
But I think Tesla put 1.8 million vehicles on the road last year alone. So it's gotten into the mass market.
But the point is that the stock exchange in Uganda, the stock market in Uganda is illiquid. Assuming I'm holding the stock of Cipla, now called Quality Chemicals, I've changed back the name.
Yes.
and I want to sell it. There are no buyers because there's no liquidity in the market. So the only person available is Shumba. He comes and says, okay, I'm offering you 53. Really, that does not even reflect the performance of the company. Because I think earlier this year they paid about $3 or $4 million in dividends.
Yeah, but they paid 2 shillings. They paid 2 shillings per share.
But this what I'm saying is that a company that is performing like that should be able to have its
Share
value
price.
of shares going up. But when you have a stock market that is liquid, then the share price will not reflect its actual performance and value. But what Professor Baruno was saying, which I agree with, is that I think Ugandans do not understand the concept of proper wealth. For us, we understand the wealth as cows, as land, as buildings, which you can physically see. But tell a Ugandan that you're likely to have wealth. See, when we say that Elon Musk is the richest person in the world and is worth 200 billion, really it's stock or paper wealth held in his stock in Tesla, in SpaceX and stuff like that. Bill Gates in Microsoft, in Apple and the other businesses like that. But in Uganda, when we say Sudi is a very rich man, you can walk around and see he has 420 buildings in Kampala.
Yes.
So unless you have a mindset change in Uganda and we have become like Kenyans, because if you go to Kenya, you find that even a primary school teacher will get their salary and their savings and go and buy
I think
stock.
it's just beyond mindset. It's safety and certainty of what is to happen tomorrow. Right now, someone will say, if I'm to invest my billion in a business, how sure am I that business is going to be sustainable? How am I going to sustain it? So someone will prefer, because there are very many people with the knowledge out there who know how profitable bonds and treasury bills are. They're investing there. So someone will not go into the stock market when they know that at least their money is 100% safe, that they will get it back.
Then we are doomed as
And if you assume that your money is 100% safe, then you're not investing. An investor is a person who takes a risk because future events cannot be predicted. So whatever, any investor is really, in one word or another, is speculating.
Yes, but the level of risk has to go hand in hand with the return on investment. So you will not risk your money.
What risk has been on the Uganda stock market since it opened? There's not been so much risk. People have not lost money there because companies have gone bust. Actually, in Western countries, people have had stock and companies have gone bust. It has not happened on the Kampala Stock Exchange. Therefore, there should be more confidence in it. And I think the problem is what Professor Baron is talking about, a mindset. We don't have a mindset of stock values. In any case, you ask yourself, how many joint stock companies of Ugandans exist that are so successful, that have lasted the last 30, 25 years, that you know? It will tell you how our mindset is built.
Wouldn't someone ask what someone would consider a valid question, that what other domestic companies have been built in the manufacturing sector, in other sectors that have grown over the last 30 years? Which ones?
Well, we have Nice Household Plastics. We have Mokwano Industries. There's a very serious...
Our time is out. I don't want you guys to be counted here because they said we're going through the census. We're already into census day, and they said they'll count you where you spend the night. So you're spending the night in studios. But I want to thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for making time for the show. Rita Chiro, thank you for reminding us about the census. I got your message. Thank you very much. Professor Waswa Balonya. Thank you very much, Honorable Karim Masaba. Thank you very much, Honorable Dixon Skateshumbwa. Thank you very much, Old Man Andrew Mwenda. Thank you very much, Dr. Thaddeus Musoka, and thank you very much, Honorable Ibrahim Ssemuju. Thank you very much to all our viewers. Please go out and get counted. It helps the government to plan. No, wait in your home. Yes, accept to be counted. People are hiding their people, they don't want to be counted. That's the concern. But accept to be counted in this census. From me, till next Thursday.